Tonight we're going to talk about cutting your losses professionally. It's one of the worst feelings in your career as an adult is when you realize something you've put a lot of energy or time or money or heart and soul and dreams, blood, sweat, and tears into is just not going to fly. Today was one of those days. The last 48 hours has been one of those moments where I had to come to terms with something I was really banking on and put my a lot of heart and soul into wasn't converting the way I thought it was, and I have to rethink if it's even worth continuing. But that means walking away and letting go of all that money and that I put into it and everything else. So I was kind of and then a friend of mine decided that she had to leave a job which that she loves. That's the thing. It's one thing to leave a job you hate, but she had to leave a job she loved and take a job she hates because it was a matter of survival. And the morning she really mourned that job she loved. I don't think she cried this hard when she divorced. Like it was a true, grief. And that's exactly what it is. It's grief. And we underestimate the importance of our work because we spend more time at our jobs often than we do with our own family. So it's vital that we have jobs that we like. Even when the tasks aren't the best, the people are decent, it's not so bad, things like that. But how do you know when it's time to jump? And the worst part is when, first of all, for you to be seeking the thing that was a mistake in the first place meant you weren't happy where you were before that. So there's already a period of discontent. Now you find what you think is a solution, put all your heart and soul into that, and then that flops. So now you're doubly demoralized, but then you lose your confidence because you're like, well, if I misjudged this, what else am I going to misjudge? What if the next thing is horrible too? So then you become a pessimist, and that's pretty devastating. So I talked to my dad about it. I said, well, how did you handle? Because he's been an entrepreneur his entire adult life, so he's had wins, he's had losses. How did you keep from losing faith and getting discouraged? And he said, well, he goes, you look at things over time and you calculate how much money you made versus how much money you lost, not in a year, but in a decade, and 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. And if you're consistently coming out ahead, then you're successful. But when you're an entrepreneur, not everything you touch is going to turn to gold, doesn't matter how good you are. That's just like investments. That's why they say diversify, right? Because two things will flop, but hopefully one takes off so much that that success overshadows the few failures you had along the way. So how do you know when to make the jump? Very few times are you going to know absolutely that it's the right time. Almost never. And you'll never really going to know, did you quit 5 minutes before the miracle? You may never know whether it was a mistake or not to actually jump. But know that life is short and you don't want to do something you hate, or because one mistake that people make is they stay on the Titanic and they just convince themselves it's going to work because that's how bad they want it, and then it doesn't and it fails. This is when you see people, for example, mortgage their house to the tilt to save a dying business, and then they lose the business and the house. They would have been better off stopping that business and letting it die, and whatever resources are left, pivot to something else. um, Pivot is a good word. When you're an entrepreneur, when you're in business, you have to be ready and learning how to pivot. Because what happens is we get stuck. That this is the way it's going to be, and if it doesn't look exactly like this, then nothing, because I can't see anything outside of this. So when you're able to kind of take a step back and a longer look, say, okay, where can I pivot? And sometimes pivoting means going back within. So in my situation, for example, right now I've got two businesses that are doing very well. And I was adding a technology that really wasn't necessary, but I thought could be like an added thing. And I was bouncing a few other things off this thing that I put quite a bit of money and energy and time into. And it's not working out. And so I don't want to walk away because then I feel like all that was a waste. But in order to continue, I have to keep wasting money. I would rather stop what I'm doing right now, take that money and put it towards something that will fly, or on focusing. Here's a term you're going to learn today: focusing on your core business. You will hear big corporations use that terminology. And what that means is sometimes we spread ourselves thin and we offer more services than is feasible, and are sustainable. And sometimes you'll offer a service that isn't really profitable because it's handy and your customers like it, and if you're making enough margin in other places, you don't mind doing this thing. But when you're starting to look at restructuring and becoming efficient and scaling down here so you can scale up there, you have to look at these things, and sometimes it's time to cut the fat, and that's called sticking to your core business. So if there are some services you're offering that just aren't really worth it at the end of the day, you cut them out. And when they say, but you used to offer it before, why don't you do it now? We're refocusing, and we're focusing on our core business. And the idea there is to look at all the tasks and the services you offer and everything, and what is taking up lots of time. Because here's the ratio: only 20% of the things you do generate 80% of your income. And the stuff you spend 80% of your time doing, you know what I mean, will only generate 20% of your income. So it's good every once in a while to do an audit of where you're spending your time every single day, on what tasks, what services, and what is the resource reward for that, besides feeling great and your customers being happy. But at the end of the day, at the bottom line, what's the monetary reward for that task? And then you start prioritizing things by revenue generation. And you'll find that when you do that, that's when you focus on your core business. Where's the most of your money coming from? What can you do to grow that? So I have two businesses right now that are doing very well, and one business that's breaking even, and one aspect that is failing. So I'm going to get rid of the one that's failing and give extra energy to maybe the one that's breaking even, so then it could actually be even more profitable, and whatever's left to growing the stuff that's already working. So that's just a matter of efficiency and sticking to your core business. What's working for you, grow that. And then what isn't working for you, get rid of it. And if it's a matter of a job, that might be even worse, when it's a job that you've put all your heart and soul into, and you thought that this was going to be it, and then you get there and it's not at all what you thought it was going to be. That's horrible. Or when you have to take a job you hate just because of the paycheck, that's horrible too. And don't think you have to stay. Like, make your money until you find something you can tolerate. And the advice I was giving to my friend is sometimes you choose the paycheck thinking you'll hate it, or because it, like for example in my case, I took a job once just because it paid well and it allowed me to sit all day. And I had come from retail where I had to be on my feet all day, and it was a very physical kind of retail. I did it for years and I was exhausted. Physically, my body was just in agony. So I found a desk job, but I thought I'd hate it because I was not a desk job type person. And I found a desk job, and the paycheck was twice what I was making in retail. So of course I took it. It came with benefits. It was like, oh my God, a grown up job. So I took it thinking I'd hate it because it was an adulting type job, but I loved it. Loved it. I stayed over half a decade there. So you never know. So sometimes it's worth it chasing the money or chasing a work environment because it gives you a break or whatever, just as a temporary. Just doesn't mean you have to give up on your dreams or that you can't go back to it. As a matter of fact, after I took that job, I got the idea to create a dinner theater production. And that job paid for my stage production. So you never know. Sometimes the things you do to tide you over end up leading you exactly to where you want to be. So don't poo poo it too much, because you never know why you're there temporarily and what little kernel you'll be taking with you into the future, or where that might pivot you. So don't curse it too much, because it could just be the best thing that ever happened to you. Have a great day.